Welcome back to episode number 117 of the Dental Marketing Secrets Podcast, the Before, During, and After Framework. I'm your host, Mark Thackeray, and today we're going to talk about how most dental practices think marketing is just getting the phone to ring. But that's actually only 1/3 of the equation. We're going to talk about this framework that discusses the other two parts of that equation. And really, the big idea behind this is that there are 3 stages to every patient journey. There's the before they contact you stage. There's the during stage where they're interacting with you, coming into the office, calling you on the phone. And then there's the after portion, which is after they've had an experience in your practice. They've received treatment, they've gone for a consult. So those are 3 different parts of your practice. And I find this framework very helpful because it helps you see what you can do in each of those stages. But if you only focus on one stage, you're missing out on 2/3 of the other equation. You're missing out on a ton of opportunity, leaving a lot of patients. You're missing out on a lot of patients. And the challenge is that we are so focused on getting more leads, more calls. We're really just obsessed with traffic, right? We want to get more people to our website. We want to get the phone to ring more. We want to get people to request more appointments and come in more often. But the challenge with that is that we're not always great. We don't always look at how can we improve that experience so that we increase the conversion rate. We're not always intentional about that process because we are so focused on the volume that we don't look at the quality of the experience that we're delivering. And then the other flip side of that is that a lot of practices don't have a system really for follow-up. They have maybe they'll call the patient back, or they'll send them an email once or twice, and that's the extent of their follow-up. If they don't do anything after that, that's it. And in these scenarios, more leads aren't really going to fix the problem. They might help a little bit, but you're really missing out on all those opportunities if you're failing to do a better job at converting. And that's a huge opportunity just right there. If you were able to do that significantly better, all of a sudden, you don't need to increase your ad spend. You don't necessarily need to get more leads. You're just getting more patients to actually commit to treatment more frequently. So we're going to talk about this before, during, and after framework. And I was first introduced to this by a marketing thought leader, I guess you could call him, Dean Jackson. He was one of the earliest marketing mentors that I had. And he broke this down in such a way that it just made so much sense to me. It was easy to see visually, okay, I'm in the before unit when I'm doing these type of activities. We got to look at those. How can we improve those? How can we make those better? The during unit's more self-explanatory. It's what a lot of businesses and practices focus on already. And then the after unit is what can we do after that to boost our marketing return, essentially, and make it a better experience for patients. So we're going to break down now. We'll start with this before unit. So really what we're looking at is what happens before they even contact you. What happens before they reach out. So these things will include efforts and activities like ads, could be PPC ads, search ads, could be direct mail. There's certainly SEO involved in this to try and show up before they even pick up the phone to call, because these people are doing their research. Whether they are intentionally or not, people always have those subconscious thoughts of, I really should do something about that tooth. It's been bothering me for some time. It's getting a little more yellow, and I notice it every single day. I might not verbalize that to anyone else, but it's something that is still occurring in my mind every single day when I look in the mirror. So we're trying to look at what patients might be experiencing or going through during that time. And that's why we do things like ads that has copy that pulls out those type of thoughts or pain points. SEO, so that when they start that research, they're finding us online. The website obviously plays a big part of this. Before they ever pick up the call, a lot of patients are going to look at the website. Not all of them. Some just see an ad, they call directly from the ad, which is great. But there are those that are comparing. They're really trying to do their due diligence and find a practice that makes sense to them. And so they will look at the website. They'll read about your services. They'll read about you personally as a provider, your experience. How does this make me feel? Convenience, location, things like that. Reviews are another one that happens during this before unit where they are wanting to really get some confirmation that you are a good provider. More than anything else, they're trying to get some reassurance that if they pick up the phone and schedule an appointment, that it will go well, that other people have had a good experience, and as a result, they likely will as well. So social proof with the reviews. Video content is another good example of things that you can do in the before unit. We've talked about that several times on the podcast, to use video as a way to really connect with patients before they come in, walk them through what to expect in their first appointment and why they should choose you, showcase even some personality so that you can build rapport. Those are all activities that generally occur in the before unit. Some will obviously occur in the latter stages as well, but these are some good things to think about during the before unit. And the goal during the before unit is to really position yourself. You're trying to attract those patients and, in a word, pre-sell them and really position yourself as the best option. So it determines, the before phase helps patients determine whether they choose you or whether they keep looking for another provider. So what are some things that patients are looking for during this time? So they're wondering primarily if you can do what they need you to do. So do you have the clinical expertise? And most of them, they check that box pretty quickly. But I think deeper than that, they're looking for, can I trust this place? Is this someone that I would feel comfortable coming to and allowing them to put their hands in my mouth? I mean, that is not a very comfortable situation. It can make us feel very vulnerable as a patient. But they're also looking at, do I like this doctor? Had a conversation just yesterday with a new associate, and we were talking about this specific point, where there are so many options today that a lot of times patients are just shopping around for the right doctor in terms of their bedside manner, in terms or chairside manner, in this case, the way they communicate, their personality, how do they make them feel? And he commented on the fact that, it's interesting because patients don't really dig deep into the clinical experience. It's more on that personal relationship side. And I totally agree with that. We've talked about that on the podcast, that patients they're not discerning like you are, or they're not experts in in hygiene and in all things teeth, right? That's why they come to you. So they're really looking at, can I trust this place? Do I like this doctor? Do they understand the problem that I'm going through? And can they fix it? So those are all things that are going through the head of the patient as they're looking in this before stage, during this before unit. So things to think about as you're breaking this down for your practice, you're looking at, okay, before, during, and after. Before, what can I do to improve my website, for example? Can I make this a real asset that stands out versus just a generic website? If they are gathering research and they're shopping you, essentially, they're looking at different providers. How do I make my website more compelling? How do I make it really leave an impression, a favorable impression in the mind of the patient versus the other options? So that's going to require some research. You may look at some of the competitors in the area. That's always a great thing to do. And just see, okay, what does their homepage look like? What does their about page look like? How can I make mine stand out even more? So those are great things to look at. Video we mentioned before. What sort of videos could I create to help patients feel reassured that I do know what they're talking about and that I can help them and that I'm not a weirdo. I'm not some guy that's going to make them feel uncomfortable. Okay? All those things can go into a video, and it doesn't have to be very hard. You don't have to make it overly complex. Just showcase who you are and tell them some of your experience, maybe share a patient story or two. So we love stories, and so do patients. So that's a great way to start with videos. Before and after cases. How do I demonstrate visually that I am clinically sound, that I do solve all these problems that you have? That's a great way. You're trying to think of it as you're building your case. If you're going into court, you want the strongest case possible. You want all the evidence stacked up in your favor. Before and afters are a great piece of evidence that showcase your competence. They showcase all the different types of issues that you can overcome for patients. Patients don't always know the terminology. And so if you can show them visually, it's a lot easier for them to relate. Reviews, as is my website. Do I showcase those reviews? Reviews are fantastic SEO trust signals. We've talked about that. They're great for patients if they go to your Google business profile, they're reading the reviews as they're researching different locations. But also you should be utilizing those reviews on your website, on those specific pages. So if you have a review that speaks about Invisalign, for example, and the amazing experience how it went with the patient, it went better than they ever thought, use that on the Invisalign page. That is perfect. That's a perfect time to share that, right? So you want to have it there so that it can do its job in context. So one thing to think about too, some of the common mistakes that practices make during this time is that they build their website once and they never touch it again. They go through that process like, man, that was terrible. I'm so glad that's done. And they never think about it ever again. They don't update it. They've just really kind of looked at their competitors and copied and pasted for the most part in terms of messaging. They'll change a few things here and there, but overall, from a patient perspective, it looks almost identical. And you could just swap out the names and no one would really know the difference. So it's bland messaging is a big mistake that a lot of people have. And that's why I say do look at your competitor sites, make notes of what they're saying, and then think of ways that you can make yours stand out even more. And that's where the differentiation comes in. This is something that we do with a lot of our private clients. Just finished one up. That was awesome. We have these two female doctors and went through that process with them. I interviewed them, and my team and I put together a whole brand distinction guide, is what we call it. And it gives this differentiation to your practice. It really outlines what makes you unique, what your core practice pillars are that you can communicate to with patients. You can use internally with your team as you're onboarding, and to really work on realignment so that you're all working together. You're all rowing in the same direction. The last thing too that a lot of people miss out on is they lack emotional connection. So they don't take it down to a more personal level when they're talking about these issues. They'll gloss over them a lot of times. They'll say, crooked teeth. They might say a chipped tooth or discoloration or things like that, but they don't really dig down at what that means for a patient on a given day. So that means, this is where it's so important to talk to your patients and really hear in their words how they describe it. Means that they are constantly self-conscious about the way they look, to the point where they've stopped speaking up in public. They don't like going to parties. They don't like going to social events because they feel like anyone new that they meet is just judging them on their teeth. And for some, it becomes such an obstacle that it really paralyzes the opportunities that they have. It could be personal opportunities to bond more with their friends and family. It could be career opportunities. They're less likely to speak up and to share ideas and to present. There's all these daily effects, these consequences of those issues. And that's where you really need to dig deep on. You want to connect that to it. And that's where, if you could find reviews too that speak to that, Those are great questions to ask your patients. Tell me how you were feeling before this. And then we'll ask them, you got to ask questions that are 2 or 3, feet deep, so to speak, the follow-up questions, so that they really you really try and dig that out of why that was an issue for them and how it made them feel and how long they lived with that pain. And now you can contrast that with the transformation that they occurred, right? So those are the common mistakes. I would say bland messaging. They're not differentiating why they're different, and there's zero emotional connection. It's very surface level. So those what I'd be working on your before unit. Again, it's just all about positioning you as the best option for them. Now think about it from a patient standpoint. They go from seeing a competitor website. It's very bland. It's very cookie cutter. They've read it a million times if they've looked at any number of dental websites. And now they stumble upon yours, and all of a sudden it feels like you're speaking directly to them. You have a confidence about you. You have a personality. You're memorable because of that. And now there's social proof. There's patients that are sharing their story, and it's hooking them in emotionally because they realize that's how they feel too. And that all plants a seed and makes them, or really kind of sets you up as the go-to provider. So if they're comparing websites and they come across yours versus a generic website, guess who they're going to pick? They're most likely going to pick your office. So that's what the before unit is all about. So let's talk about the during unit. So this is really what happens when they interact with your practice. So this will include things like phone calls. It'll include things like email, the scheduling process, their first time appointment, case presentation. And the goal during the during unit, pretty self-explanatory, but is to convert trust into action. So they started to trust you with the positioning, trust you enough to start interacting with your practice, to pick up the phone, to schedule an appointment, to come into the office, even look at a treatment plan. And the goal is now to move them into action. And this is where marketing and operations collide. This is where they start to go in line, they start to align, and it can be very, very powerful. So, well, let me share some examples before we get into it. So things like how you answer the phone. So the energy with which you receive calls and talk to patients. Am I someone who has their hair on fire because I'm trying to do so many things, which is realistic, right? I mean, that does happen all the time in practices. Or am I one that can take a breath, answer the phone consistently with energy, where I'm eager to help the patient, where I'm eager to get to know them, to meet them, to have them come in. I'm excited about the prospect of serving them. That's a great example. The speed at which you answer calls. This is being more and more emphasized these last few years, I feel like, which is awesome, especially as we're getting these AI receptionists and things like that can help with this. But speed is very, very important to that. If you're not tracking that, I would see if you can't implement some type of tracking mechanism to allow you to see how quickly the calls are answered, how treatment is explained. Walk through that process, get it down, record it somehow, and then review it. That's one of the best training examples or training exercises that you can do, is if you have a process down, you record it, and now you review that process. I was just with a doctor last weekend who made the comment that his team actually stopped him. They said, "Hey, you used to say this, and this with patients. You're not doing that anymore. You need to start doing that again." So get your team to help review that. And if there are things that you are leaving out just because you created a new habit, you just forgot, and now you've moved on, ask for their feedback. Use this as a training exercise as a team to come together and say, how can we make this better? How can we present treatment in a more effective way? Right? And the last example I'll share is financing conversations. This is another great training exercise. Walk through what you do right now, record it, review it together, and see how can we make this better. From a patient perspective, what are some things that we can do to make this more palatable, to inject more confidence, to make it easier for them to get started? So as we're looking at that, let's review a few common mistakes too. These are also important to avoid. So missed calls is the big one. We talked about being able to answer calls with energy and to do so in a timely manner without the phone ringing and ringing and ringing and ringing. But missed calls. So missed calls is a big one. Rushed conversations. Again, your hair's on fire. You're trying to do so many things. You're just trying to get to the next person. Are you able to be more intentional with that? To take a breath, to set yourself before you have those conversations. Communication. Can we improve communication? And then finally, what is our clear next step? Always have a clear next step. And if you know that they're not ready to move forward with treatment, schedule their next hygiene appointment. Just keep them coming into the practice. That's another great way to maintain that relationship. And more often than not, they will go through with that treatment eventually. As long as they're coming back into the practice and they're seeing you time and time again, and that trust is there, they will most likely 9 out of 10 times accept that treatment eventually. So don't think of it as I have to do this now, but we're going to take care of you long term. And if that means we have to wait a little bit, that means we have to wait a little bit. We want to make sure that you're ready, but we're here for you. So this is really the before unit. This is the one that we're all most familiar with. So I'm not going to spend as much time there. But one last kind of thing to remember with the during unit is that it's more of a conversion focus. Meaning, if you're not seeing as many case acceptance, say that's low, or you're just at the end of the month, your new patients might be not as high, they might be down, or they might not be as high as you'd like. More often than not, it's a conversion problem. Hopefully you're tracking leads too, and that will help to help you understand if it is just a conversion problem, or maybe it is a volume problem. But more often than not, it is a conversion problem. And this is where this during unit really comes into play. Okay, last, let's talk about the after unit. So during the after phase, this is really what happens after they've had an experience with your practice, after they've come in for the appointment, after treatment. And we're talking about things like ongoing follow-up, reviews, referrals, reactivation, if necessary, ongoing communication, just staying in front of patients, right? And practices do have some things in play with this, right? They're coming back. So what's nice about acquiring a new patient is that they generally come back every 6 months, unless you kind of have a different strategy for hygiene. But that's generally the case with a lot of the practices. So that's good. So they have follow-up reminders. They have, if they missed an appointment, or they're inactive, or they're trying to reactivate. So generally they have some of those that are built into their practice management system, which is a good start. However, there are still a lot of opportunities that are missed in this after unit. The goal is to maximize the lifetime value of that patient. And value, you contribute to that value in different ways. That could be more treatment, with a asterisk that they need it. We're not trying to push any treatment that's not required or not needed. So it could be additional treatment. It could be referrals, and should include referrals, right? It should include reviews, because that helps contribute, not maybe directly to the lifetime value of that particular patient, but it does help in the overall marketing of your practice, because that's a big component, like we've talked about. So these are all different ways to maximize that lifetime value. That's really where the after unit comes in. And this was, in the last episode, when I broke down the case study, if you haven't watched that one, make sure you go watch it. It's great, or listen to it, because it showed that on the first, for one of my clients was going through an annual review, just to give you a short recap of their marketing efforts. So they had a total investment, marketing investment for 2025 of $148,000. And that included Google ads, it included PPC ads via Instagram, included SEO, included community events. And so 148,000, that's what they spent in 2025. Their first visit of production from all the new patients generated during that year totaled 118, I think, 118 or 116,000. So 148,000 and only produced 116,000 in production immediately in that first visit. So if you're thinking short term, you're thinking, man, that is terrible. That's not what I hoped. And yeah, it would be frustrating if that's all you saw. However, when you zoom out, that same group of new patients over the course of the next year, and some even shorter because it was just taking 2025, produced 1.5 million in production. Okay. So it's this idea that the real production is generally made after the first visit. Yes, there will be some on that first visit production, which is great. We want that. We want that for sure. We can't wait forever for all this production to come. However, if you're not looking at it if you're not zooming out and taking in the full picture, you're missing out on the majority of the production. So again, this is where the after unit really comes into play. Is it, am I getting them back in for another appointment? Even if it's just hygiene, just want them back into my practice. Do you have follow-up? Do you have ongoing communication with them to encourage referrals, to encourage reviews, to make sure that they don't go inactive, to educate them on treatment that they're thinking about? These are all things that you can build into your after unit so that you are more productive, right? So that your patients get all the information they need to make the best decision possible. And if you think about, if you were to do all those things, just think about that for just a second. If you really were to put into place a system that easily asks for reviews without any pressure and gets them, referrals, it's a proactive system to generate referrals from these patients that are coming in, communication to help them stay in the loop, to help them know that you care, to prevent people from going inactive, communication or education to help patients that are thinking things over to understand what their options really are and feel empowered to make a decision. Imagine if you had all that in place, how much more productive you would be. It's awesome, right? I mean, that's what the power of marketing, right? That's the leverage that you gain by looking at it in these three phases: before, during, and after. You don't have to use this framework. I get it, but it's a really helpful one for me. So I wanted to share it. So some common mistakes in the after unit is they don't have follow-up. There's no referral system. It's just a hope and pray mentality, which is terrible. And I've talked about that a lot on the podcast. And they don't do a whole lot for reactivation. They might send a message. They might send the automated reminders a couple of times, and that's it. Those are all missed opportunities. Reactivation in particular, it's one of the easiest things to do to get them back in. They've already invested in you before. The relationship is there. Oftentimes it's just because they forgot. Just they got out of the habit. They know they need to come back in, many of them. And oftentimes they have more issues than just cleaning. So that's a good one for sure. So those are the three ways to look at it, three sections or the three units when you're looking at marketing. I think, again, I find it very helpful. And it helps me look at it more as a system instead of just a campaign, like just a Google Ads campaign, or we're just going to run an Instagram campaign or a direct mail campaign. But we're really looking at this whole system that helps people become familiar with who we are, to start to trust us, and then to act on that trust. So it's really what I've seen is growth doesn't come from doing more marketing per se. It comes from improving that entire patient journey, the before, the during, the after. So those are the three ways to look at it. I hope that's been helpful. If you have any questions on this particular episode or any other episodes, we'd love to hear from you. just reach out to my assistant, Maria. That's maria@markthackeray.com. And we will get your questions answered. If you haven't left a review, if you've enjoyed the podcast, please leave a review wherever you're listening to this podcast. Helps other doctors find us and get value from us. And I would really, really appreciate it. It always makes me so happy when I see a review. So thank you for joining us today, and we'll talk to you soon.